I think halfway through August, you're gonna have you like the cultists may not show up for an episode or ever again. I'm excited.
You're excited to die.
Hey, like I've said before on this show, if I gotta die, it's gotta be a creepypasta way.
I mean, that's fair, yeah.
Like, I die as I live, immersed in creepypasta.
That tracks, yeah. That's on brand for you, for sure.
Yes.
Hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigor Mortis. I'm Mikey, the E stands for evil.
And I'm the gamer in yellow, and you're not supposed to be doing that.
I'm not?
No. So, we don't know where the hell Cultus is. He's supposed to be back by now. But he's not. So, like, the content train don't stop for no one. So, we gotta put content out regardless. And thankfully, we did get an email from a redacted email address, oddly enough. It's kind of weird. It has an audio file on it that's of substantial size. So we figured we'd just put that up on the internet. That should be fine, right?
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Yeah, what's the worst?
Oh, hello, and welcome to Kentucky Fried Al Dente Rigor Mortis. I'm Review Cultist.
And I'm Extra Tasty Crispy Adam from the Role Playing Exchange. And how are y'all doing today?
And we're here to discuss, well, some things that are creepy in most pasta, in a way.
Yeah.
So I'm down here in Kentucky, hanging out with my friend Adam. We're going to be going to Gen Con sometime this week. And in the meantime, I've been spending some time here in and around Kentucky and also in West Virginia, because we just got back from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman is, and also where, according to Google Maps, the coordinates for Ichor Falls were. So we actually went by the coordinates of Ichor Falls, and well, we had a little bit of an adventure while we were on the way out that way.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, I've been on the show several times. I think we were counting at least at some point on the way on our 2.5 hour trip we did today. I feel like I really haven't done the homework. Like what you
right?
Mentioned,
Yes,
you mentioned to me beforehand Ichor Falls, and you were very excited about it, and I was like very clueless about it. Now, since you've made it down here and kind of elaborated on Ichor Falls,
yeah,
I'm very intrigued, and I look forward to actually delving into that. And fortunately, I hear there's a lot of creepypasta material on a certain website we're all listening to right now.
yeah. So yeah, if you go to ichorfalls.com, you'll come across Ichor Falls, which is this website that Kris Straub, prolific webcomic artist, he did Chainsaw Suit back in the day. He's done a webcomic recently in the last couple of years called Brood Hollow, which is actually a sister town and kind of a sister story series to Ichor Falls. And he wrote this. He wrote a couple of short stories set in this creepy West Virginia town called Ichor Falls. It's right off of a river called the Alethea River off the Ohio River, just south of Point Pleasant. And it had such stories such as like the infamous Candle Cove, which you can check out online. Like there's various places you can find it. Several people online have done their own interpretations of it, like through different media. Like Ross Payton from RPPR did an actual play video, like a tabletop game scenario of it using World of Darkness years ago. It's actually one of my first introductions to both Candle Cove and RPPR and Ichor Falls. And also Channel Zero Season 1 was inspired directly from Candle Cove. But it's more than just the creepy, weird pirate show that was actually, in fact, static for 30 minutes. It was this entire town in this sleepy, creepy town in West Virginia, like mist-choked. It has a set of falls to it. And there's just really weird little ghost stories and haunted, like, I'm not sure if it's... I never really kind of got the Appalachian vibe, like, that I've gotten from, like, later, like, listening to, like, things like Old Gods of Appalachia and stuff. but it's definitely got like kind of a West Virginia vibe because of it's got like an iron and coal mine kind of storage to it. It's got links to that, like to like an iron mine in there. It's got a bit of it's sort of like the sleepy, creepy Americana town that you sometimes see in a lot of other pieces of media and stuff like that. Honestly, when we were driving into Point Pleasant today, if I was taking pictures of the downtown strip right where the Mothman Museum and stuff is, I could easily like add in like some fog filters, and that could easily be a substitute for Ichor Falls, like as a setting, like for photographs of it and stuff.
Yeah.
We went by the coordinates. There's nothing there. It's literally just there's a giant forested mountain ridge.
Yeah.
In the spot where it's supposed to be.
A private drive
and a private drive called I think it's like Benwood Lane or Bendwood Lane. Yeah.
And it's Lord, it looked like it's sitting on top of old train tracks, just like that little plot of land there. But yeah, when we drove by it, it'd been really cool to actually have went down. I was hoping there was like a service road or something like that we could have traveled down, but it
is a private. It looks like it's a private road. So
private road, and it's residential area, and is awesome. And as tempted as I would be to just run up that hill to the actual Google, there's got to be something there, but I don't want to get shot.
Yeah. I'm all like on the real side, I'm afraid of getting shot. On the fantasy side, I'm very terrified of finding some kind of like a camera there or some kind of like weird thing there that's like tied to Ichor Falls and like will teleport me to Ichor Falls or something.
And in literature, and I mean definitely modern literature, and then you start dealing with stuff with the internet that came out and whatnot. There's kind of a common motif that I've seen in, not all over the place, but several different places, was that somebody finds something on the internet and they're the one who kind of looks at the breadcrumbs where no one does, and then it just basically leads them to damnation. Like Laird Barron, my favorite author, mentioned, like wherever I'm at, I always talk about Laird Barron, but his Old Leech series, which the Croning is a part of, their Necronomicon is the Black Book.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these stories revolve around people finding the Black Book and leading them to damnation. And then, us walking up the hill for this internet creepypasta story and then finding something which scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, like legitimately. And it's like, well, that I died as I lived, immersed in creepypasta. I found my... And I mean, like, as cool as that would be, I don't, like... I'd rather not. I'd rather come back home.
Yeah.
We'll see if that happens. The week is still young.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's been a week.
Yeah. And we made, on this whole trip today, it's like, there's probably no way that you could possibly edit out all the background noise. We brought my children along with me. So, like, my daughters were sitting in the back of the car while we're nerding out over coordinates to a fictional town along the Ohio River.
Yeah. And that's like, okay, so the coordinates were a bust, as far as we can tell. And we weren't risking going into like into an Appalachian forest.
Yeah, and it's a steep. It was a steep incline.
That was a big hill. Like I'm from Ontario, sir. We don't have hills that high. But like on a more like kind of serious and like interesting note about the area, there's this little quaint place called Hillbilly Hot Dogs. Mm-hmm. That we came across, and that is if that's not like some kind of like perfect plot, like spot for like a horror scenario or a horror story, or even like a horror movie. Like, oh man, I don't know what is.
If you're following along with like wanting to look this up, just Google Hillbilly Hot Dogs and then West Virginia, and it's a tourist trap. I mean, it's along the lines of Point Pleasant, and there's a surprising amount of traffic going in and out. And even when we were in Point Pleasant and all that, and things like BuzzFeed Unsolved for doing a Mothman episode and whatnot, I mean, there's a lot of like traffic through there. So this thing has sprung up, and you can look at the menu. I mean, there's gigantic hot dogs, and there's a couple of little oddities and like little trinkets here, but it's just this...
The decorum, the aesthetic there. It's like... I would honestly describe it as like Mad Max meets Appalachia
Yeah.
in a way, like just in terms of like, and I hope that's not like sounding
No,
like
no,
or anything like that. It's just like, but like, just Mad Max in that like all the car paraphernalia, like all the cars, like the scrapped cars and the car paraphernalia that is just bolted to everything, and like all the lights, like all these like strung up lights and all these like signage, and it's like biker motifs and like Mad Maxian Raider stuff. It's something honestly straight out of Fallout 76.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite that was an unexpected gem that we found.
Yeah.
On our trip over to Ichor Falls, or to the location where Ichor Falls was. And then we went up to Point Pleasant after we found that Ichor Falls was a bust.
Yeah.
We went to Point Pleasant to check out the famous and holy Mothman.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also a treat. Like you said, Adam. But the BuzzFeed Unsolved guys showed us on their special on Mothman the Village Pizza Inn, which we got to actually have Mothman pizza, which was awesome.
Yeah.
We got to put pins in the map of where we all came from, and there was a lot of people coming into that small restaurant.
Yeah.
And in fact, it looked like they'd actually like upgraded the restaurant, like they'd gone to like the next building over. And then we got to check out the Mothman Museum itself, which is, I mean, it happened in the 60s, and like there's been sightings ever since.
61.
Yeah,
I
61,
think, around that. And for those of you, the history in a nutshell, like in 1961, there was a bridge from going across the Ohio River that, while people were on it, it was right around Christmas time. There was a structural problem with it. It collapsed. I'm basically reciting what I remember from the plaque.
Yeah.
And basically 47 people drowned.
Yeah.
In the Ohio River. Now, there has been a film, came out in 2001, had Richard Gere and Deborah Messing. Again,
based on a book by a journalist in Point Pleasant around the time of what was happening.
Yeah. Sadly, it was filmed in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. The fiends.
Yeah.
The audacity to not shoot it in the place of its where it was set, but yeah.
So, but there was mythical sightings of the Mothman, and I mean, you all can look it up here. The Mothman was like seen near a No Dynamite factory. There's some people said the Mothman tried to take their baby. I mean, there was like a hysteria around this whole time period.
A Mothmania, if you will.
Yeah, which they have a festival for Mothmania.
This cryptid, like Adam said, the Mothman was sighted by the TNT factory, like outside of town by some couples, and since like then there's been sightings of it, and the tie-in to this bridge tragedy, which is a real life actual tragedy, was supposedly like the Mothman was sighted shortly before, like was sighted flying under the bridge.
Yeah.
But also apparently gave some people visions of the tragedy preemptively, like before it was about to happen. Like I think what was it? A dream of like
Christmas
presents
in the river.
Yeah, like that is creepy. Like that would be a really good. Not to make light of a tragedy, obviously, but that would be a really good, creepy like thing to throw into a scenario if you're dealing with a creature that has some kind of prophetic, like doomsaying sort of like ability. Yeah. Is have these like kind of visions that are like abstract like that are like either like tunnel vision to that kind of spot or like just like abstracted enough that it's like what is going on, like out of context sort of situations, like why are there Christmas presents in this river, and then to have that thing happen, it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
So it's kind of gone from like being, it's just like some kind of mutation as a result of chemicals and stuff in the environment, to this supernatural or extraterrestrial entity that is that gives off premonitions or communicates telepathically or psychically to people and stuff.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the concept. See, I'm jumping back to the beginning here when you were talking about Ichor Falls.
Yeah,
and I like how that author has like and it has, like, if it was an accident, it's a happy accident, but like it's really tapped into the mysticism of like that region and all that.
Yeah.
I have read Candle Cove. I didn't actually realize it was the same guy. And I mean, for me, it was even really cool, like looking at Candle Cove, because I experienced it on RPPR of people like the posts, the stories told like through blog posts and such.
Yeah,
And they were tagging like they were in the Ashland area, which that whole area is like a tri-state area. There's like Kentucky, which is Ashland, Huntington, West Virginia, and then there's like Ironton, Ohio. It's like all three of them come to a head there. You could be in all three states in a matter of minutes.
Yeah,
and like that's a really cool trick to like take something that's already spooky and then make something unrelated. It's like, I'm trying to think, like any other site of anything supernatural or weird or.
Well, there's also like I mean, honestly, thanks to the Fallout 76 and I know that there's they use a bunch of the new mutations and a bunch of the creatures and stuff they use in that game. They derived from West Virginia folklore. Yeah. Like the Grafton, there's like a Grafton monster, which is this giant like headless behemoth thing. Yeah. That was from near a plant or something. Yeah. And there's other, like there's the Flatwood monster in West Virginia as well. And the Mothman is in the game as well. In fact, the Mothman Museum is in there, and sort of like an Ouroboros, the Mothman Museum is selling merchandise for Fallout 76. Yeah. And so it's just like kind of reverse, like just coming full circle. Also, interesting little fact about Kris Straub and like Ichor Falls and stuff. Kris Straub is not from the area. He is actually from California, and the closest, according to the little like blurb on the back of Ichor Falls, A Guide to a Quiet Community, which was like I think the little published version of like some of his short stories. It says like the closest he's been to Ichor Falls was Charlottesville,
North Carolina.
I think Charlottesville, North Carolina. It was close enough. So it's interesting like that he wrote these like set of short stories and like throw them on his on this website that he created about this fictional town in West Virginia that he's never really been to, or at least as far as like that one publication is concerned. So I don't know, like, because generally what you do is you try to write what you know. Yeah. And I imagine he probably did some research because he does seem to pin down some things that are kind of essential to a West Virginia town, like the
geography,
town,
like I mentioned.
Yeah, the geography. Obviously, the town of Ichor Falls had an iron mine. They had a chemical, like kind of a processing plant processing thing for the iron to try and like make it, because it was like kind of like it was like dirty iron. It was like they had to. It wasn't very good quality iron, so the companies that were mining it were trying to come up with different processes to make it pure, and that ended up with an incident in Ichor Falls' history, which he created an entire history for this town, and it comes out in both the stories, but also on the website. There's actually a whole like timeline of events that have happened and stuff like that, such as the Black Summer, where it was revealed that a bunch of chemicals from the processing plants was leaking into the Alethea River and basically sterilized half the town. And so that kind of stuff was probably I mean, we've talked in the past about the Rust Belt and stuff like that, and like things that happen in these areas. Yeah. Like that was kind of not on, I don't know if it was on that scale, but it was like those kind of things that were kind of prone to happen back in the day.
Yeah. Would you say there's almost like in these instances, there's almost kind of a common motif of, and I'm kind of drawing from like Ichor Falls, I'm drawing from like the real life accounts, and whether they're true or not of the Mothman, but I'm also thinking of the first episode or first arc in the like Oh Gods of Appalachia, and other things. It's like you're dealing with a group of people them and their land are being
poisoned.
Poisoned. They're being exploited. They're disposable, and that's horrible. And that's all that. But why is there this inclination in literature, or a common motif, I guess you could say, it pops up where not only are they dealing with the economic aspects of it, but they're also dealing with, I find it really interesting that one of the common motifs that go into fiction or modern fiction in general with horror is that we're dealing with an exploited people, like such as and like you could say even in Point Pleasant's history, you could say in Ichor Falls, you can say in like Old Gods of Appalachia, definitely the coal mining arc and whatnot, where this company is using taking from this community like people, like poisoning them. It's like unsafe work conditions, raping the land, like just horrible things that happen. And then all of a sudden, not only are like, if that was just a story by itself, it would be too grim and too dark, it seems. But then we add that aspect in, like, well, they were digging and they dug too deep.
Yeah, or like there's some kind of like with Ichor Falls, you find out much later in the anthology of his stories, and even like you can check them all out on like I think most of them are free on the website.
Yeah.
But like Shining One from Above the Sky is like an indigenous folk tale about the supernatural presence in the land, and like what is exactly what's potentially the source of the supernatural element of Ichor Falls, which is this Shining One, and it takes the trickster of indigenous folklore, to rally a bunch of the trees and rally nature basically against Shining One, and like after like they try to at first he tries to like stop Shining One by challenging him to a race, and then Shining One wins. However, that's when they all nature and the trickster ambush Shining One and basically just pull him apart, and throw him into different locations around Ichor Falls. Like his bones blacken, and they pull his bones and drop them into the earth, and they blacken and become brittle, the iron. His blood, his ichor, flows down through the land and becomes the water. His soul, they can't find his soul, and it's roaming around the land, and like the animals try to catch it, but they get tired and dumb, or the trees try to catch it and they become tired and they have to stay put. So that's where we get like the one of the a common landmark in Ichor Falls is the Stillwood, and eventually Trickster like sees that like all his friends, all the nature is like has been rendered like mute by this presence, this Shining One soul. So he casts a mist across Ichor Falls, and then imbues when men come to the land, he imbues them, some of them with his mark, so that they can keep kind of keep watch over what is happening and such. And so Shining One, his soul, like this evil presence, this dark presence, is somewhere in Ichor Falls, but it can't escape because of the mists of the falls and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's also like a correlation that the Shining One creature is an aspect of it at the very least is what is called the Stillwood King, which is this person or this entity that lingers in the Stillwood where time stops. And if you get lost in the Stillwood, you have to like you're slow, like time starts dilating while you're in there.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of like weird little creepy supernatural elements like all throughout the town, and like there's and it kind of gives, and like going back to like what like we were saying, like the supernatural element here of like with that the corporate like the bosses of this company and stuff are doing is that they're digging up the bones of a god or of the supernatural entity in the iron. And the iron has impurities, and so they're trying to use chemicals to process it. They're using science to try and purify this iron because it's poor, but it's all they've got. And then we get like things like the Black Summer.
Yeah.
So it's adding an element. I think it's the addition of supernatural to something that is tied to something realistic or familiar, that has happened before in history, kind of adds a little bit of a sugar coating to something that is hard to swallow sometimes.
Yeah. It's also kind of like how haunted houses are, like ghost stories and haunted houses kind of things are really, I mean, they're a reflection of poverty.
Yeah.
Or like you're invested and you can't get away. And that's another aspect of the horror.
Yeah.
Like,
Like, why would these people stay in this haunted house? Like, well, they've invested most of their money into renovating this house and making it their own.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Like, would you would you rather be homeless?
Yeah.
Or live in a house with some noisy spirits?
This is a conversation that just happened, and on the drive back when you were reflecting on. I'm proud of my heritage. I love Kentucky. I love Eastern Kentucky in particular. I love the people. I love a lot of it, and there's problematic elements, obviously, like with any region and whatnot. But like I can't leave easily. Like I'd give up everything if I were to move away. I'd give up like my family that live here, like the family farm, my identity, like all these things, just like your investments in a house are tied to this place. The farmer who lives in Ichor Falls, who has nothing but is keeping a roof on his head, is better than the farmer who can't sell the place and moves to Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, or Ashland,
or anywhere like that.
Anywhere else. Yeah, they're stuck. They're kind of stuck in this. They're stuck in the mist, like Shining One.
Yeah,
like Trickster kind of condemned this land, that land. And it's like, it's a good analogy kind of to what you're saying. Like, it's hard to like break away from your roots. I mean, some people can do it, but like most people, like they get, like you're born and raised somewhere that like you have like you have roots and you can't break those roots, or it's hard to pull those roots out. Yeah.
You're 30 minutes away from where I grew up as a child, and you're 30 minutes away from where I was born.
Yeah.
Like different places like that, but I mean, I'm a lifer at this point.
Yeah.
And it's something I honestly, and I'm sorry that your podcast has to be that moment that I had this epiphany of like
no, that's perfect.
The relationship of this. And like, I'm looking forward to jumping into Ichor Falls on my own. I'm when we're past Gen Con and like whatnot, I know that I'm going to be laying in bed reading on my cell phone, just kind of getting well versed. So I really do appreciate you introducing me to this.
Yeah. So we've been talking about like Ichor Falls and like how it kind of relates to some of the stuff that's been going on with Appalachia, and or how it connects to the Appalachian roots that it has. We've recently like picked up or helped back a Kickstarter for a game called Holler, which is uses the Savage Worlds like RPG system, and is my best description of like the setting and stuff of that is it's basically Ravenloft, but in Appalachia. Mm-hmm. Like the coal barons and like the company barons have released some kind of with their industry have released some kind of a smog or some kind of a chemical into the air that has encapsulated this portion of like a couple of mountain valley or a couple of valleys and mountains into a pocket dimension of its own, separating it, isolating it from the rest of the world. And it had me. I've been thinking about it. Like we've been talking kind of like off and on like a couple of our little like trips, like our drives and stuff of that for the last 2 days. About like I've been thinking of Holler, and I don't know if I'd use the setting as is. I think I want to actually convert the system and part of the setting to Ichor Falls, because like when we were talking about like going by Ichor Falls or the coordinates, I was like, well, wouldn't it be really interesting to like fall through the mist or like go down that dirt road that goes into the woods in that mountain, and then end up on the other end out of the still wood and into an Ichor Falls that is isolated by or is a pocket dimension of its own, and is kind of like stuck out there. It's basically like isolated from time and space, much like what happens in Holler, where like the people that are working there on the land and the people that are of the land, they're just kind of, they're stuck under the oppressive thumb of like a company that seem to own this pocket dimension of a weird Appalachia.
Yeah.
That for some reason that really like clung to me when we were like looking at like going to the coordinates, and then we've been talking about Holler for a couple months now even. And then we've also been talking about Ravenloft a little bit.
Yeah.
Over on your podcast, RPX. And then what was the other game? The other idea that we had for it?
Kind of also wanting to kick around the idea, and it was just on something because this happened organically while we were speaking here. There's a Nordic horror game called Vasen.
Right. Yes.
And Vasen is like the beginning of like industrialization in Sweden.
Yeah.
And the land has man is encroaching and forgetting the old ways and whatnot, and there spirits and entities like that are not being appeased anymore, and it kind of, the entire framework is you're a member of a secret society that deals with or appeases these entities and stuff like that. So
not necessarily like it's a monster hunting group, but they're not necessarily about just exterminating the monsters. They're about like basically preserving. It's kind of like a supernatural, like ecological, like preservation sort of society.
Yeah,
in some ways, mixed with a monster hunting group, because like there are like some things that need to be either put down if they won't be appeased, or if they're a threat to themselves and humanity.
Like tigers in the wilderness that have developed begin hunting people and stuff like that. They'll go after. And so, I kind of also like that ecological kind of aspect too, of like being a conservation officer and stuff like that. So jumping in with Holler. And the first thing I would like to kind of give you for homework as you work on this is there's like let me go back and say this, that there is, from someone who's lived their entire life in the region, there is been a kind of renewed, I don't want to say a renaissance, but there's been a renewed interest in a lot of things Appalachian. Mm-hmm. In fact, I caught you almost saying Appalachia a moment ago. It sounded like it when you were going to talk about it, but like the locals call it Appalachian. You can kind of like you always refer to it Appalachia. It just sounded like you were going to say Appalachia, but
I try to keep up with Appalachia. Yeah.
And I mean, nobody be offended or not, but like there's just like a renewed interest in the area to a degree, because from someone growing up in this region, and it's why like things like Holler reaches out to me, is like when we have been depicted, it's poverty porn. It's look at these poor toothless hillbillies. Yeah. And that has been, for the majority, it feels like, of my life, I'm proud of who I am and where I'm from, and I'm proud of my people and the struggle that they overcome. And there's obvious problems and all that, but like there's never been a focus on like the positive, enduring part of it. And then, like I said, maybe to me it feels like the last 10 years, like there's an interest. There's like musicians from this area, like Tyler Childers. He, in the country scene, more of the folk outlaw kind of area. He is from Appalachia, and he's made mainstream, and that's great. And then there are we don't, how hipsters are, right? Yeah, like the people who like really kind of jump into this, and sadly enough, it's kind of more of a term for like the other who didn't grow up like that. It's like there's like, instead of hipsters, we have hicksters. And stuff like that. And I mean, no shame. It's compliment. I mean, copying is the greatest form of flattery. Kind of thing like that. So like, and another thing,
imitation is the greatest form of flattery. I was trying to think of it myself.
It eluded me.
Yeah, and like I totally, I definitely get it. Like, cause I'm from Canada. I'm from Ontario. Like. I'm not Appalachian at all, but I do find it very interesting. I've never really thought down on these people, or thought down on this thing. I've always thought of it. It's always come from a place of like interest and admiration. And like, again, the last 2 days, I don't think I've gone a couple of hours without saying how beautiful your local like area is and such.
I appreciate it. And then from someone who grew up watching Clueless come out, Felicia Silverstone and like Paul Rudd, coming out in the 90s, and then they make a joke like he's her stepbrother or something like that, and then I made a joke about being married, and she goes, "Well, this ain't Kentucky," and whatnot. I mean, like I personally, kind of internalize that. Now, things I would recommend, because we're dealing with like work labor strikes and whatnot.
Yeah.
Research for you. It's on YouTube, folks. It's a public. I think it's last time I checked, it was on there, but it's called Harlan County, USA, and Harlan County, USA is basically a documentary that took place in like, I think late 60s, early 70s about one of the second labor strikes with the coal miners in eastern Kentucky, in Harlan County and whatnot. And, you know, if you're wanting to do it and you're wanting to do it right, I think that first off, you need to kind of witness the struggle, or witness, like see the film or look into it to figure out like the bad guy that you're depicting and whatnot, and like being able to kind of handle things like sensibly.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting documentary. Like, and I mean, there's a history of this oppression, and I mean, one of the first times, like, I think I told you learned about this today. Like, it's called the Battle of Blair Mountain, and that was in West Virginia, like right on the Kentucky, like, right adjoining Kentucky and whatnot. And that's like the American Army fought like the miners, essentially, and stuff like that. And like, so I mean, looking into these things. By the way, the game that just kickstarted, The Price of Coal, like, I picked it up. I have it on Road 20. Is based on
that battle.
That battle, and on that. So I mean, when we're dealing about gamifying this, it's just being able to kind of at least have some knowledge rather than just kind of like we're not saying just jump into it.
Of course. And like I'll be consulting you for some of the like I'll be talking to you and stuff of that when it comes to like when I'm working on things, like because I can see like for the Ichor Falls idea of like converting it from using Hauler to kind of add into it and stuff. I would definitely want to like get some more information about like this, like what the companies were like and like how like that whole situation, because I'd probably be running it not like a lot of Ichor Falls ends up getting a lot of the stuff that's been done for Ichor Falls tends to be in the 80s and like or like the 90s, like because a lot of the horror stuff, a bunch of the horror stories and stuff that Kris Straub wrote in with was kind of like set in like a nebulous like 80s 90s kind of time, sometimes in the 70s and stuff like that. Some of the stories do go deep, do go farther. Like there is one where like it's I'm pretty sure it's an iron mine, and like a miner, like there's an accident down in the mines, and he comes back up to he refuses to die, even though his heart's been pierced by some kind of debris or something. He refuses to let go. He refuses for his heart to stop beating, and he tries to make his way back to his family to at least tell his son that he has to take on the responsibilities to keep the family going and stuff. And like that's back in like early 19th century, or not 19th century, 20th century. And there are other stories that like take place in and around that kind of setting. Like there's a poker game. There's a story about a poker game where like they're all having poker and they're taking a drink and stuff like that, and then like a person who loses the poker game, like there's something that happens and they get one of the losers gets all pissed off and basically just like starts crying and then walks away, and the newcomer who's like entered this game is like, well, what's going on? Like he's taking one of the drinks and like he's starting to play, and I was like, oh, it looks like we all we won out of this one. And then like some girl starts like imbibing, like bringing drinks again to like in the bar, and it's like and the newcomer's like, no, I think I'm good. It's like, no, sir, your son, you're gonna want to take that. It's like, why? It's like, that's the antidote to the poison you drank earlier. And so like basically they were playing a poker game, and whoever lost doesn't get the antidote.
Oh God.
Yeah. So it's like, and it's just like, and that's one of the stories. Like, and it's it's set in an earlier time, exactly. So but yeah, I think if I was going to do like, and for my game, or for like the game idea I was having for Hauler, I would want to set it somewhere before, like somewhere that's not set in like the other people don't generally tend to set it in. So but I would definitely be looking at material that is I'd be doing research. Yeah. Because you never want to, again, like we've had this on El Dente before, where it's like somebody is clearly has not done their research. They're just writing out of their ass. Yeah. And it kind of sometimes shows. So like, I would definitely want to like have some kind of I want to be respectful to the material, to the locale, because I'm not from this place.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to. If I want to apologize if it kind of sounded like gatekeeping just popping in like that. I just know that coming from some there are sensitive people, and me and you kind of also have the unique perspective, like our games are heard, and stuff like that. So there's an extra level of checks and balances that need to be applied that if I'm going to record myself playing or running a game, that I want to make sure my shit together.
Yeah, we want to make sure there's no harm, no foul sort of thing. Like and like we are like we're being respectful to the material, because like the intention is not to harm.
Yeah, and the intention, like we're all sitting down here to have fun.
Yeah,
and I mean, there's a way to do a healthy balance between dealing with gross exploitation of land and people, and adding a touch of Mystery Inc., Scooby-Doo, Monster of the Week, and adding a touch of Curse of Strahd into the whole deal. And I got, allow me to get this ball rolling here, just things that kind of pop into my head about, and I'm drawing heavily from Curse of Strahd, as well as like, I do like the Esturgo, Scooby-Doo. Like, they really had the exploitation of this company and this plant, like destroying the Crystal Cove area in that. But, so Curse of Strahd begins with the adventurers encountering one of the, what was the Vistani. Vistani, which is kind of thank God, Wizards of the Coast, arguably not done enough to do it, but they're trying to mute the gross racism of basically this proxy for the Roma that serves Strahd. They meet and they encounter one of the Vistani, and it basically sets across the path of you entering the mists and whatnot. I like, and regardless of like if you set it in modern era, like this proxy of the evil barons, because I do like this idea of this like exploited land that exists out of time and space. And was that a real kicker? I like the idea of them actually feeding their product back into the real world. It's just like you end up like in this meat packing plaque kind of thing. And like, it could be a job. I mean, it could be you just driving and boom, you drive into Spooky Silent Hill kind of thing and you get a job. It could also be a temp agency. You meet at a bar, you meet at the Adelco temp agency or some shit like that, and then you end up over there, and you're stuck there, not only not knowing that you can't leave. I'm sure that would be something that pops up into the game, but I like the idea of where you're stuck there, kind of drawing on that you're invested and you have nothing when you leave. Like, you're only getting paid in company script.
Yeah.
And again, you're shopping at the company store, and your money's worthless if you leave this place. Yeah, which historically is what they did.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of stuff like ties in, like the company, like in the Ichor Falls stories and in the lore that you get in like on the website and stuff. There's not only just the metal, like the metalworking company or the guys who are the company that's mining the metal and stuff like that. There's also the developers. There's a whole like new section of the town that is being developed by people who by a corporation that's come in to develop the land into a place called Elysium, and like versus like Alethea, which is like the lower income areas and stuff like that, and like the downtrodden locations, like the older parts of Ichor Falls. Like they're all kind of named like Greek, like off of like Greek naming and stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, Elysium is like the higher class like area. It's where like all the new development is happening. All the newer houses are being built and stuff. But even in those locations, there's the element of like the supernatural, the corruption is kind of showing. Like there are like locations that are just like things are creeping in, or like things are like warping that location just as much as like the old place. Like the old place is almost like kind of like the stuff that was poisoning the old stuff is starting to poison the new development.
In Curse of Strahd, there are Burgermeister and characters like that are like more affluent members of society, but and while they live in a prettier cage, it's still...
They're still stuck there.
Yeah, they're still in a cage and whatnot. I like that.
and you could even have it like because I think there's like a resort, or I think there's some kind of apartment complex or resort in one of the Ichor Falls stories where you could have like basically a temp agency, like you were saying, when you're like people that are like getting hired on as work at this like hotel or at these apartment complexes or these like office buildings, and that's great. You're working there, and then you start realizing you can't leave. Once you it's like a roach trap. Like you can enter, but you can't leave.
Yeah. Let's make this a little bit darker. They have their claws, obviously, in the world outside of Ichor Falls.
Yeah.
You're an environment EPA person or something like that, and I mean, you either find like because each character's gonna have different backgrounds and stuff like that. You could be someone doing water samples.
Yeah, honestly, you could be from like different avenues of like how to get in there. Like again, like somebody in development, you could be somebody who just moved in, who's been like suckered into a timeshare to move into one of these newer like a gated community that's popped up in Elysium.
Yeah,
you could be, like you're saying, like an EPA, like environmental stuff, like checking the water samples and stuff. You could be a miner in like, and we were talking a little bit earlier. It's like where you were like thinking like with this whole idea of like people coming into the mist. They don't necessarily have to be all from the same time period. They could be from like different time periods, but they all end up in this static, almost like still time area. Because like that's kind of what the way I'm kind of thinking is like the mist and the forest, the stillwood, might be something that is the encompassing barrier of Ichor Falls.
It exists outside of everything.
Space and time. Yeah.
We'll stick with the decorum that we've seen in like older towns like Point Pleasant and like this older Americana. I mean, downtown Cincinnati. I mean, not downtown, but like the older areas of Cincinnati where all the train yards and stuff like that is like just the older buildings that are like. And like they're old, abandoned, disrepair, like any old American town. Like I would love to have that motif. I mean, you could even have if you were going from all time periods. I mean, you could have any from the indigenous natives to like the people who were the frontiersmen to like
somebody from the 70s, somebody like
the future,
like 2020 or 2035, like somebody. Let's not go too far, otherwise we're going into like time watch. The time watch system is just like, although that's not a bad idea.
No, I just really like the discordant kind of note that you would have all these people that are like stuck in this one time period and whatnot. And they're, I don't know, it would add to the weird, and the weird's what we kind of like. And
and then like maybe even like the conformity, like the part of the horror could be also the conformity. Like, okay, you're all from these different places, but you all have to get in line, and like you all have to find a role in this town. Otherwise, you're going to get burned out, or you're going to get chewed up by Shining One, or by the company that's still that's either serving the horror, serving the presence, or maybe even has a bit of a leash on it now. So you have that easily.
Let's look at our end game. So we've kind of got our setting. So let's talk about our end game. So we've kind of got a setting. We got some weird things that we're going to add into it and whatnot. I mean, I think the first obvious course of discussion here is if we could treat it like a Kris Straub, like one big boss hog kind of character that you're going against. Now, from my playthrough of Kris Straub with some of my friends over the pandemic, one option is to actually do like an uprising against Strahd and stuff like that. And there's a precedence historically in worker strikes and whatnot. So I think one particular avenue that, you've got the monster of the week thing. You could even divide up the game in like sections, like this group of people, or this part of town, these workers, and basically like your missions are
you got to help out a group. They've got a problem, and like basically not to steal your, not to
No, but
cut you off, but like just like build a repertoire.
Yeah.
And then like build alliances in a way.
And uniting them. And then if you're not comfortable, like as a player, like there could be a proxy of the person who's kind of the mouthpiece, like the young like vocal member of the community that could be actually the starting point of like you're kind of following their vision, and that kind of would like free up the players from trying to figure out how to unite. That would be, you could narratively have it like you need to go talk to the people at this place and this place and kind of unite them. And basically, I mean, it could be a bloody rebellion, which I mean, we love that in role-playing games, but it could also be to like you don't realize. I'm trying to think.
Like maybe like not again. I don't mean to keep.
No, please do.
But I'm just thinking it's like what if like the company maybe at some point in the history of Ichor Falls, or in this version of Ichor Falls, they found a way, like they found the key to the fog, or to the mists, or to the Stillwood. Like they found the secret. Maybe they found the beating heart of Shining One, or some artifact or something that keeps the place like out of time and out of space. And so the problem is basically like getting it and basically releasing Ichor Falls and these people from their cage, from their prison.
I got a suggestion. I like that. Here we go. This is, in my mind, this sounds great. There's an old expression like and somewhere along the lines, like you don't know, like if you're sitting on the porch, you don't know that you have a leash on you, so to speak.
Yeah.
Until you start trying to walk away from it. So I think part of the process of getting into Ichor Falls, and it could be like a visual thing that like the characters can see eventually, like there's an invisible chain or something like that metaphorically that binds them to it. And until you, like, you've got to awaken everybody's spirits and their sense of freedom and individuality and whatnot, and it like breaks these metaphorical chains. I mean, it could be something that you visually see, like when you look at other people, like they're being chained down. And I've seen this in some other work of fiction, and I can't remember what it is, but like the reason that we're stuck here is because you were in a bad spot to begin with, and it was predatory. And when you get over there, you're chained to the porch, so to speak. And the old wise woman, the old Nana, or Nanner, or whatever you want to call it, like Mamo is what we like typically in this region. And there's other regions in the South that use like Mamo and whatnot. But you know, the wise woman. Yeah. I'm also kind of thinking along the lines of like Fallout, not 76, but like Fallout 4. There was a character that the sage woman who like,
the one that takes the drug, like that, like she takes jet and some of the drugs and some of that, and like gives you visions, or which
I never did do that because I wouldn't dare like that.
I didn't want to harm her. Like, like,
you can basically run her to death on that. And like if you're a horrible ass monster, but like, you know, you could do something like that. That could be your leader and whatnot who sees that. And you know, obviously, like for like resolution, you're going to have to fight Strahd. You're going to have to fight the big top dog.
Whatever's up at the top of the conspyramid.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be like a bloody, like, you know,
revolution
kind of thing like that. It could be, I mean, one day everybody just like when after you break the final boss, I like the idea of like everybody looks around, the fog clears, and they walk away with their life, like, or I don't know. That's kind of weird, but I do like the idea, like,
or maybe the prison survive. Maybe the prison stays, like, because again, it is holding something. Like there is a reason why Ichor Falls is where it is in that situation. But like the fog is releasing the people that aren't supposed to be there. Yeah. Like me, like I like that idea. Like maybe the company got in, and they realized they had a good thing they could exploit here. And so then they started pulling people in from outside into this place, and they couldn't leave as a result of like their control. So releasing that control, the prison to the Eldritch thing or whatever it is that is whatever the source of supernatural is still there, because it can't get out, or it shouldn't be able to be allowed to leave. But whatever the company was doing is broken, so that it allows for the people like that were trapped here are allowed to actually leave, like walk away from the Stillwood.
Yeah, and that's what. God, I almost ruined Kris Straub for you, but there is an aspect of that can be put in the end of it. It's realistically, and this is depressing to say, but the site gets the whole area of Ichor Falls gets declared a happy fun site.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and then you're the ones who stay behind to monitor the water trough,
be the wardens,
and whatnot, and I don't know. That's kind of cool. Like I took control of that, and I do want to apologize. Like that was my vision of like the end goal was just uniting and whatnot. Do you have?
So first off, don't apologize. Okay. That's my job as a Canadian. But secondly, like more realistic, like actually, like I like that idea. Like I like this is a brainstorming session basically. And we got there. We got to a spot where I think like, yeah, that's honestly where it should be. I do also like the idea of like, yeah, there will be some people maybe at the end of the resolution that like they don't leave because they are like maybe the leaders of certain factions. They decide they are chosen to stay to safeguard this, like you said, happy fun site. And happy fun site, I mean, as dark and depressing as that is realistically, it is something that it is an element of Americana that I think would work well with this sort of situation as well, and it's certainly been used in horror scenarios and storytelling in America. Like Delta Green uses them. I've heard at least 2 or 3 games in the Delta Green system and setting where a happy fun site is used. In fact, that was how I found out about happy fun sites.
Sadly, not me.
Yeah,
I grew up near one.
I'm sorry to hear that. But yeah, so I like that idea. Going away from the hauler idea and like the Curse of Strahd sort of like thing. Let's go touch on the thing that you were saying earlier, Vaesen, because with Vaesen, you're part of an organization that is in maintaining and safeguarding. Basically finding the balance between the supernatural and humanity as humanity is pushing this industry into nature. I do like that idea, and it is kind of something that pops up occasionally in some of the lore and stories of Ichor Falls, where, like I said before, the story of Shining One from Above the Sky has something where Trickster touches certain people, like marks certain people within the town when people come to the land. They are marked to be the protectors, to be the guardians, be the wardens. Yeah. So you could have a secret society, and it doesn't have to be anything like Trickster, or anything. That doesn't have to be necessarily like a physical embodiment or like something. It could literally just be like when you've been called to this town, like you've been called to Ichor Falls, for reasons that you cannot fully explain. But as a result, you've been given the site. Like in Vaesen, you get the people that you play as are people that have the sight, the ability to see and sense the supernatural. That sounds like the people that are marked and basically entrusted to in the roles of wardens for Ichor Falls to me. Yeah. I remember when we were first doing some of our earliest episodes of Ichor Fall for Al Dente Rigor Mortis. We had an episode where we talked about an idea for a game where you were working for the Horticultural Society. And basically, you were pruning problems within the town. Like it was sort of like the cover was the Horticultural Society, and you were basically the gardeners of the Stillwood. And so you were going and you were basically dealing because things were coming out of the Stillwood, or because there are no wolves in the Stillwood. There are no wolves in the Stillwood, which is another story in Ichor Falls. It's like it's all about emphasis. It's like there's no wolves in the Stillwood. There's no wolves in the Stillwood. There's no wolves in the Stillwood. And it's just like, what are the wolves in the Stillwood? So it's like supernatural, like something like, again, there could be like some kind of a Vaesen monster hunt, or monster of the week kind of scenario where you're like things are leaking out of the Stillwood. Perhaps maybe the Stillwood is the focus of the supernatural element or the supernatural troubles for Ichor Falls, and so. There are there's multitude of different like creatures and entities in Ichor Falls stories that you could plumb from and make Vaesen, or use the Vaesen rules and stuff to like kind of create your own like supernatural entities that need to either be like
Yeah.
appeased or like negotiated with or put down if necessary.
Yeah.
And then also you're dealing with because this town is has both a mining company or some kind of a processing plants and like industry like that, but
Yeah.
also has these developers that are trying to basically encroach on the Stillwood or encroaching on the nature and like the old ways of Ichor Falls. You can also have like that being a kind of a tense issue between like what's leaking out of the Stillwood and what's coming into the town for revenue and such.
Yeah.
So
You got a time period in mind for that?
that one is a little bit trickier. It's like I would think like either mid-century, like mid 20th century, or maybe dare I say even like the 90s or 80s. Do you have is there anyone that you have like a specific in mind on that? Because
I think isolationism is like one of the key factors, and definitely like without there be globalization and whatnot, I think it would, and kind of sticking with almost some of the source material of Vossen itself, I would say no. I like the idea of it being no later than, I would say between World War I and World War II.
Yeah, I think that works for like again American history. Like it's a good like kind of like space where it's like things are, there's almost like a as far as I'm aware, there's like sort of like a facade of stability, like or like it's like things it's good times, but it's the good times are going to drop soon, and no one's really fully aware of that yet, or
maybe Great Depression. Maybe they dropped, and there's okay. So really, with this content here, isolationism has been a key. Like nobody wants to come here, and then when these jobs come here, like to exploit the land, and exploit the people, and exploit everything like that, that's the only game in town and stuff like that. I think with Ichor Falls, it needs to have that. There's not like this big boom where people, I can't remember which road it was, but they called it like the Hillbilly Highway, where people were leaving like Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia and going up to Ohio, to the automotive plants, or going up to like that. So I think prior to that, it's kind of, I like it just maybe from like an aesthetic, I like the idea of like the veteran returning from World War One.
Yeah.
Kind of deal like that. I like the idea of there actually being, possibly though not really, depending on where exactly you put it in that. Veterans of like the Spanish-American War, or veterans of the Civil War. Of course, that's 1867 when that ended, so that would be like a very ancient person. Fun note, like West Virginia was not like, it was just Virginia, and then there was a separation because West Virginia wasn't down with what the South was saying. Yeah. And whatnot. So that's why there's Virginia and West Virginia and stuff like that. So you got kind of, it's just somewhere in there is that sweet spot. If you don't want the if you don't want the World War One vet, the
Vietnam War.
Vietnam. You still have isolation in that, and that's even. And you also and sorry, not to tie it into like for like the Vietnam War. I think that was in my American history's a little iffy on the that was in the 70s or 60s. It went over into the 70s. It was okay. It was in the 60s, and honestly, America jumped in because of the French. Yeah.
Because like that could tie into like the Black Summer, like because the Black Summer would have just happened around that time as well.
Well, the Black Summer is Agent Orange.
Well, yeah.
It's like when you, of course,
the way I was describing it. Yeah, it's basically in Alethea, like in Ichor Falls. Yeah, it's basically that. Like it's like the horrible like swaths of like chemically induced like cancers and like birth defects and stuff like that. Yeah, it's like
it's like a Hopper in season 4 when he's talking about it. Yeah, and things like that. There's a lot of different deal. I just 90s would be pushing. I'd love to see what it was done. There's still like the internet is not widespread and whatnot and all that. So I think it would work.
I also think like I did bring up the 90s as like a potential, but I think honestly like I'm trying to keep away from the 90s and even the 80s because like those are the spots that other people have tapped already for Ichor Falls, like with like RPGs and stuff like that. Like again, Drunken the Ugly did a stint of Ichor Falls. I think it was in like the early 2000s, like late 90s. RPPR touched on a little bit with Candle Cove, and again at the same time, but like yeah, in like 80s and 90s, like that's around like also that. Those two time periods in terms of the horror genre are very common nowadays. Like so, like you're always trying to find like something that's tells a story like a different story that's not just the same as like everything else, right?
Yeah, let's pin it down before it's not mine. Like so, we have. I honestly still think it should be like. If you want to like, you want the emphasis to be like on the decadence of like the money and things are going great and stuff like that. I think it'd be prior to the great stock market crash and whatnot like that. So that would kind of like you've still got where you can pull from a rich history, and at the same time like there's industrialization and exploitation and whatnot like that. And just somewhere in that sweet spot. I think I couldn't see the forest for the trees on that one there. I do want to apologize for kind of prolonging that. I can apologize when I want to, sir.
Okay. Fair enough.
And I make no apology of that. But
I am unapologetically apologetic.
Whatever your situation is, like you need to be at a disadvantage. Like if I've learned anything from games like Delta Green, and even the Monster of the Week, like, or even Supernatural kind of set like you're working outside of the system. And this would be, I mean, this is maybe where you would draw more in like on the Esturgo kind of deal from like Scooby-Doo. Yeah. If you wanted to make it more of well, honestly, if you're dealing with Voss and whatnot, you're basically, it's Monster of the Week kind of thing like that. I mean, maybe... I wouldn't even say you couldn't even be law enforcement and stuff like that because those people were in the pockets of like the big iron and lumber. So I mean, you're the people, you're the miners, you're the
mom pa shop in town that's trying to like etch out a living outside of the big company.
There's something about break going like the mine shifts over and you come back at midnight and you got your headlamp, and a pickaxe and a shotgun and you're going into the mine with your friends
to go deal with something that's popped in or like, I think as of this episode getting posted, we just did a Ichor Falls story in preparation for my trip, called So Cold, and it's a very short story. But it's essentially a revenant, or like a vampirizing revenant, like a lady, like this woman. Like I kind of got the impression that the story was this guy had killed his wife or his girlfriend or something had happened, and he'd just gotten back from burying her, and then he was sleeping, and then he was trying to get some sleep, and he started hearing her voice again, like next to him, and then. Like the temperature started dropping, and as she got closer to him, and as he would breathe out air like exhaust, or like breathe out like you'd see his breath hang in the air from the cold, and it would form a face. Like it would actually show her face, and then as she got closer and closer, she eventually froze him to death. Yeah. And I had this idea of like, well, she's just a revenant, or like some kind of a spirit of like a spirit that like of a
wronged woman.
A wronged woman, yeah. And my idea was that maybe he wasn't the only one that caused this. Like maybe it wasn't just a crime of passion or an accident or something like that he's trying to get rid of. Maybe it was a conspiracy against her, and it wasn't. And so like it's like a slew. Like if we're having this as a Vossen game or like in Holler or something like that, depending on. You can also have it in any of those games because it's basically just a murder mystery of like. You're following a trail of bodies that are dropping under these mysterious circumstances. Like they're freezing with exposure when there's no reason for them. Like their houses were warm. There was nothing open. There was no doors or windows open for the air to come in to freeze them while they were sleeping. They just froze to death, like ice cold, like ice in their beds. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. Like who's part of this, and you're finding like kind of the connection of like what they did or like who, like what's happening and stuff like that. And like, oh yeah, where's that missing? Like, isn't somebody missing? And then you find out like that it's the revenant of this woman that was scorned or like was like betrayed by a bunch of her friends and her lover. And then it comes down to like, do you let her finish the job or do you actually try to stop her and like spare some lives? Like they may not be innocent, but like, are you any better if you let this revenant do like finish the job, or do you try and save a human life?
It's interesting. I like that. There's honestly, like for any kind of game like this, I recommend people just watch like at least the first 3 or 4. Shit, there's like 8 or 9 or 10 of them. Seasons of like Supernatural. Like that's one show that did like a Monster of the Week kind of setup
so well.
Yeah, like better than like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Or even I'll even dare say like X-Files. Though I did like the government conspiracy, and definitely when X-Files went monsters and cryptids and all. That's pretty good. I mean, wow. And then just you got a series of this. I think with a game like the Vossen one though, and like there being a final game. Now you could set up a monster or whatnot, like the what was it called? The Shining one?
Shining one.
Yeah, you can set up the Shining one. And maybe in this one here, you can actually destroy it or weaken it or whatever you want to do. But like, you're still going to probably have the showdown with it. But you're also like a shepherd taking care of people.
An idea that comes to me, and this is, again, deriving and being inspired by things that we've talked about in the past couple of months. Speaking of Japanese, some Japanese creepypastas that we've read and discussed on the show. The idea that maybe the whole like Shining One being like trapped in the mists and like lost in the mists around Ichor Falls for centuries. Maybe that was some in that way. Like the reason why that was done was basically to slow it down, to make it less powerful, so that one day it could be dealt with. Yeah. And then that's how we get like the back in the time before time, like when Trickster and Locke basically like was able tried to stop him. He Shining was always perceived as too powerful, and so like the best way to do it was to pull him apart and separate him away, and then like lock him in this place so that he couldn't escape or that he couldn't find his way out or anything like that. Maybe that in doing so, like time weakened him. So thus giving like suddenly this superpower has been waning and waning and waning until a point where like mortals can now deal with it. And then hence why Trickster has marked people to come in, marked people to watch over the situation until the time was right, in that it could actually be dealt with by mortals. Yeah. It adds a little bit more of a hopeful element to what is otherwise a cosmic horror kind of element of like this eldritch horror being locked away. But like, I kind of like that idea of like the idea of like something being basically like left alone to deteriorate, or like what like it's like kind of like what they do with radioactive material. Like it has to enter a half-life, right? Yeah. So that's basically what Shining One is like basically it's rendering him like weaker and weaker and weaker until like somebody can come along and actually deal with him properly.
And Shining One's created a honeypot that makes people and makes it profitable to be there. So I mean, like he's actively working against it too. Yeah. Like maybe he's also trying to like keep himself sustained. Like it's almost it's like a vampire, like it's like Strahd, or like you said, a honeypot, or it's like Pennywise, where like he's feeding on that area. But in this case, like he's doing it because if he doesn't, he starts weakening and he starts dying. Yeah. So he's like, that's how he's been using human souls, or using that suffering in human souls as a means of like sustaining, countering what was done to him. All these ideas are really great, and you may have noticed that we've kept talking about the Shining One, which is, from my understanding of the Ichor Falls literature, as told to me today, it existed here before Western expansion and whatnot. So we're kind of dealing with like something primordial to the land and whatnot. And one of the things that, as speaking as a person who does not have very much familiarity with Native American culture, I'm afraid that I would run a risk of being insensitive, even
Even out of ignorance, it's
yeah,
still
ignorance
yeah.
is still ignorance. If I was like, kind of going into older myths and whatnot, and just, for me personally, I've been kind of trying, as we've been talking, just trying to think about just ways that, we get away from that motif that's been done time and time again of like, there's something ancient here, and the natives warned them not to go there and whatnot and all. So I mean, it's something that's done time.
At best, it's like a tired cliche.
Yeah.
At worst, it's kind of exploitive and insensitive and disrespectful to to these people's who have already been exploited and disrespected time and again by European cultures.
Yeah.
And like we're both a product of that situation. Yeah. Unfortunately,
this is not our sandbox.
Yeah.
There are other options if you want to explore this, such as Coyote and Crow, which was kickstarted, I think, pretty much at the beginning of the pandemic. It has been released, and it's kind of an alternate history of where, like, if the settlers never came west, excuse me.
They never even made it across the ocean, I don't think.
Yeah, never. And this is like the world that developed in their absence, and when allowed native populations to grow at their own rate and whatnot. So what kind of ideas do you have if we wanted to kind of get away from
sorry, not to cut you off. I didn't mean to cut you off again. Yeah.
No.
To kind of if we're not feeling comfortable using those kind of motifs in the story, not using that kind of like source of the supernatural presence, maybe it is something like something in the soil, but it's not tied to like a Native American or indigenous myth or folklore. There are some of the stories in the lore. If we wanted to say like maybe like the land is cursed or something cursed, it was cursed in this area a little bit later than what some of the stories are. There is the Hirsch camera story where this man named Hirsch, an inventor, he in the stories I think he was supposed to have developed a technique for developing photos and stuff like that before a few years before the previous the actual person. So I can't never remember the name of it.
I taught arts and humanities for several years.
But like he's kind of very obscured, and like he's actually like I think there was even like some hints that like he had been like concealed, like his whole like invention and stuff had been concealed and such, because he using chemicals and water in and around the Ichor Falls area to develop his photos. His photos with his camera and like the techniques he was using, they always came out wrong or surreally macabre. Like, for example, like he took a photo of a tree and the photo came out with the tree, like the ends of the tree branches and stuff like that, all being like looking like hands. Or a character, or some people like staring at like him taking like a picture of somebody in the middle of the street looking at the camera. And there's like just something very, very peculiar about the photo. Like it's almost like gives off a 3-dimensional impression. Almost like the person is actually like they're like a part of their soul is in the photo, like locked away. Or like even, and then some of them are even like weird apparitions. Like he took a photo of the river, the Alethea River. Or I think it was a photo of a street with a couple of buildings and some people like during some kind of coronation, but the location was off. It's actually like he took the photo, but like there must have like maybe there was some kind of weird like displacement because the photo shows that the street is like geographically somewhere in the river, and like that it would drive people mad, or it would like they just like that's not right. That's like very like there's something off about these photos. So maybe that is the source of the supernatural, or the cursed element of Ichor Falls, is that this Hirsch camera, or the photos of the Hirsch camera or the Hirsch family, like they are the source of like maybe they might even be the big bad.
treat it with the pollution aspect of it. Now we're kind of getting away from possibly necessarily the general feel of Boston, but you could do like there was chemicals that were destroying the ozone, and then we had to redo how I can't remember what it was, but you know how they got rid of certain aerosols and things like that because of that. So the photo,
or DEET. Like DEET in pesticides, and then we realized like that was like causing problems in like the ecosystem and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we had to stop using those kind of pesticides.
Basically, this man just walked around shooting pictures and shoot a hole through reality.
Yeah, that would definitely. Yeah, his technique is actually like causing like problems in Ichor Falls and making it weird like that.
Maybe the pictures, and we have these photographs here, and that's your mission. That's your briefing. Yeah, you've got a stack of photos that are being dealt out to you, and here's the let's take the easy fruit here, like the tree hand, thing like that, and like whatever you do in the mission, like you're gonna banish or send it back or destroy it or however we're gonna do this thing here. But then when the photo turns into the original photo that was taken once the issue, so you kind of,
it's been purified.
It's like we talked about this, obviously not on mic, but on one of our trips where we're just rattling, which has been one of the joys of us being able to finally hang out together. Like my poor children sitting in the back of the car. Can you imagine all they've heard? But like,
just listening to this, yeah.
I was talking to you about I think that Pacific Northwest podcast that did the like rabbits and all that. They did a series of like a dramatization of it called the Black Tapes, where this guy who disproves the supernatural, like he can disprove everything except the things that are on these VHS cassettes, and like each episode is kind of framed about, well, here's a one with the woman with a smile that's upside down or something like that. So I kind of like that format of like these are how the missions are. You're going through and you're fixing whatnot.
Like almost like fixing the inconsistencies or the flaws in reality around Ichor Falls. Yeah.
And when we look at it from this point of view here too, when we strip away the history, then that opens it up to your 90s scenario.
Mm-hmm.
That opens it up to like modern day era and stuff like that. Maybe you're not really wanting to deal with labor exploitation as much as the jobs are all gone and like, everything's in decline and in decay, and these people that are eking by on this haunted house kind of
the haunted house being an entire town.
And I think once you sever certain aspects of like source material, if you're going to do like a fan fiction, like this is our fictional Ichor Falls, then you're kind of married to that. But once we strip away the shiny one,
mm-hmm.
and then the trickster, which almost seems like a proxy for like Coyote, I think, or what? Or Rave or Crow, or one of that was, again, I don't have an in-depth knowledge. I just remember that those are kind of like the trickster animals from like what I've absorbed in Western culture. But once you strip that away, you I relish the freedom that it would give us for a game like this.
I do like the idea of like I like the Hirsch, like the whole like idea of like the photos. I think would have the potential, like, because it would give us. You could still do Vossen. It just wouldn't be Vossen in like this in the time period it was kind of sort of allowed, or it could be, because it could be like maybe it was maybe the idea isn't so much like maybe the Hirsch camera or the first time they were used. That's when the supernatural elements started happening. That was in the late 19th century, early 20th century.
By the late 1800s, we had
moving
stills. We were actually starting to do live movies and whatnot.
So like, what if the photos sort of like as a monster, sort of monster of the week, but also like a little bit of like gotta capture them or gotta catch them all kind of thing, or like what if the photos themselves, like not like purifying them so much as using them to like the like when the camera took those photos, it released something.
Yeah.
And the photos are the key to putting, like, you have to put them back in the photos. So maybe like then like down the road, and like again, if we were doing this as like a campaign of with a series of photos, it could either start with or end with somebody finding these photos years later in the modern day, seeing these weird photos, but like the story of the actual games were actually like set in that time period when the Hirsch cameras were being used and releasing these things into the world.
Hirsch realized what Hirsch was doing. Hirsch pitched it in mind, and that camera has been open the entire time. So you've got like a hellmouth, kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing you're closing. I want to also remark that this conversation has made me turn a complete 180 on certain stuff. So I'm also the same man who earlier when speaking to you was like, if you were wanting to do this, you need to be kind of aware of the history and all that, which I still stand by that. Mm-hmm. But I'm also, I find myself, I talked about poverty porn, and then I felt like I when presenting earlier ideas and stuff like that, I was focused on labor movements and exploitation and stuff like that, which is misery that I was focusing on. And that's great, and that could be a great story and all that, but I also like this revitalization, because what you were talking about something earlier, and it, like, when you're talking about people overcoming and all that, like, that's very humanist. And like in times like this, I find this like, with the world we live in today, I find like there's such merit in things like that. Have them be Hicksters. Have them be some people who love the folk art and love the region and whatnot. And you can make your game a celebration of this part of culture and whatnot. It doesn't just have to be about blood and guts and sweat and like just exploitation. It could be, your family was touring this area and you fell in love with the geography and you took a job there. It could be that you work at a regional area that's getting like folk art from this area or whatnot. It could be like backpackers or hikers and whatnot like that. Like it's amazing that, and I'm kind of sharing my revelation online. It's amazing that I automatically gravitate toward the things that I find oppressive as being the narrative that one could tell. Yeah. When you could take a monster story and make it this fledgling town that survived despite everything else that's experiencing this renaissance, and you're part of this cleansing and this exorcism. And
like, they're not forgetting the history, but they are embracing it and then like trying to make something better out of it. Yeah. Yeah. You know what I'm thinking of? Like, another system to use this for would probably, like, again, it would be tweaking the system a bit. Are you familiar with Trail of Cthulhu, like Pelgrane Press, like their gumshoe version of Call of Cthulhu stuff? Dreamhounds of Paris, where you're playing as artists, like of the surrealist movement that are having to go into the dreamlands. Because the art movements of that time period in Paris is changing the dreamlands, and as a result is changing reality. Yeah, I feel like that could be something to do. Like, that could be a tweak of that system. You could use that as like, you are artists. You've discovered the cursed Hirsch camera, and you are trying to solve these mysteries that are coming out of these photos that you found. And also trying to like improve, to try and make this town better, or trying to like kind of give this town a chance, like get it out of the oppressive like darkness that it has. It's been sitting in for like decades.
You start out compiling folk stories of because a lot of history was oral and whatnot. So it can almost be like who's one that did the fairy tales, like Hans Christian Andersen? No.
Yeah, Hans Christian. No, the brothers Grimm. There's the brothers Grimm.
The Grimm brothers. Like, it could almost be like, you could also have a game where like you're talking to an elder in the community and you're recording stuff, and then you're
and then like as you're being told the story, or as you're jotting it down, either something happens that like is tied to that, like you almost like them telling you this story awakens something, or you pulls you into a deeper mystery. Like you get wind of like a location, kind of like how we did today, where we went by a location online that where Ichor Falls is supposed to be, and we found some interesting things on that strip of road, but we didn't find Ichor Falls. But like in this, like, because there is a I know Drunk and the Ugly podcast, the GM for that for their Ichor Falls games did something similar where they went to the local library of Ichor Falls for a school project because they all had to like find like something. They were all newcomers to the town, and they all had to choose like they had to find something at the local historical society to do a report on or do a project on. And it ended up being basically like how those ended up being the seeds of like where they were going, what they were investigating in the town, and it ended up taking them to a creepy place in the woods, like an old cabin in the woods, where this boogeyman, which is from the lore, basically I can't remember the actual name of it at the moment. William Harker, otherwise known as the Stitched Man, but he's basically a tailor who, like, either his family died or he killed his family and stitched them into suits, and then he proceeded to do the same thing to people in town or something like that. And so like the characters go to this place and try and like stop him or banish him because he's been wakened. And maybe by telling his story, that's what happens. Like he's like that presence has been reawakened after years of being dormant.
My image is I like that. You could also make it like, okay, so we picture elder person community. Let's say they're in a nursing home. Yeah. And you're interviewing stories for that, and then you end up going back and looking at the microfiche at the local library. Go shh, and you see the picture. Yeah. And you see something wrong, and then you look into it, and then whatever the game goes, you finish it. You find the supernatural, you go to it, and then you go back to Mammy, and she like, what other stories can you have? And then it's just honestly,
it just keeps, and it's basically your briefing and debriefing sort of situation. Yeah, almost like a certain little campaign on RPX called the Uncles of Penny Treadmill, except you're not the briefings and debriefings aren't from like a little girl, and it's from like an older woman.
Jesus, that's the best segue I've ever seen in my entire life. I like that.
Well, again, because it's a good like bit of like you need to have something like the anchor. I think these kind of games, like you need to have like I feel like in that kind of narrative, you need to have a quest giver, or you need to have like some kind of a means of like sending your characters off to do things or to get them started. Yeah. So yeah, I think that would be a very like having the mama or the elderly figure that's at the retirement home, the Ichor Falls retirement home or something like that. Talk about like that kind of like talk about like, oh, I remember like maybe she starts saying like she remembers like the Hirsch. Maybe she's the daughter of Hirsch, because like Hirsch was in like 19 something like the 19th century, like early 20th century. Maybe that's his daughter or granddaughter. Yeah. And your characters are like, getting like stories off from her and stuff like that, and that she's basically talking about her grandfather's work or the great work that her grandfather did. And yes, for the audience at home, Adam's just like eyes widened for a moment and right in some kind of revelation.
When you fix it, the world goes to the way that it was supposed to be in the picture. So as you actively go through and fix her sins and whatnot, you're making the town better. Yeah. And I just, that's just kind of, I mean, it doesn't seem like revolutionary when I say that, but I just really like that you're restoring something to what it could have been. Yeah.
Like the photo warped it and it needed to be like cleansed of some kind.
Yeah. The factory that exploded never exploded, or the church that burnt never burnt, or
the schoolhouse that, sorry, not to pull something from the lore, the schoolhouse that burned down doesn't burn down. Yeah. And like back in that time, and then suddenly that tragedy is no longer there, or like a collapse in the mine didn't happen. Yeah. Like you're actually like retroactively fixing the town. It's getting a little time watchy in there, but yeah.
And eventually what you're going to end up doing is you're going to try, if you need to put a bow on it, if you need to have a big bad and an end goal, then basically as you start fixing these things, you get the attention of like, I'll even use like a esoterist kind of reference from another gumshoe system of esoterists, but the outer dark. Yeah. Like, you look in the abyss, the abyss looks back at you, and you're
or the mists themselves are like, or the Stillwood King, because like the Stillwood King isn't necessarily like anything to do with the Shining one. It's in fact, I think in the Stillwood King story, it's a guy who went into the woods and never got out, and he's become like one with like the mold. Like his skin has gotten pale and full of fungus, and his blood has been replaced with creek water, and like he's just, for every step he takes in the Stillwood, years go by until somebody sees him, and then he gets all that time back, and he's able to just basically like right at your face and get you.
Yeah.
Like I hope that snapped. It's
like, audible.
Yeah. Okay. And so like, yeah, that could be your big bad, is this entity, the Stillwood King, who's some guy, some poor schmuck that was trapped in the Stillwood like back in the 1800s. And he's been like biding his time. And like and maybe he was manipulating Hirsch into creating the camera, or maybe his like light, his like the chemical or whatever the process that maybe Hirsch made a deal with the Stillwood King when Hirsch got lost in the woods, and the process, the chemical process, is actually the blood of the Stillwood King, and so he's been biding his time, like having these like these abnormalities happen, so that maybe he can be freed from the Stillwood.
Yeah.
And then that's your big bad at the end, is the Stillwood King.
Even though it's not Polaroids, I like the image of the people taking a stack of photos, and there's like imperfections on each one of them. But when they flip through it, like kind of very like a deck of cards and whatnot.
Yeah.
You see the man move.
Oh God, yeah, like that creepy, again, like it's the great creepy like uncanny valley movement, like, or uncanny movement of like stop motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, this has been a pretty good, I feel a pretty constructive like little conversation we've had.
In person. Like, so you guys are like, this is...
Oh man, this is like, it's been 3 years since I've had an al dente episode where I've sat on a couch or sat in a chair next to somebody in another chair and actually recorded a discussion like this.
I still feel kind of weird though, because I have headphones and I'm hearing you through the speakers instead of my ears. So I'm still somewhere in the digital age, but it's not. This has been really nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me as you came down to my house. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. No, this has been fantastic, and I'm sure we'll do some more talks before I'm done before I'm done here. But I think that will probably do it for this episode. So, Adam, would you like, before I go into our into the al dente rundown, is there anything you'd like to promote?
A moment ago we had a beautiful segue, but then we had more
and then we destroyed it.
No, yeah, it's all good. Look, listen. At this point, I feel comfortable saying I'm a longtime contributor to Al Dente Rigor Mortis and sister podcast One Less Die, even though I haven't. One of my games hadn't been aired yet.
It's coming, guys. Don't worry. 2023.
But I run a little podcast called the Role Point Exchange. We are typically more or less like actual play. Like occasionally we do like talkie episodes talking about like stuff like this and talking about role playing games and whatnot. And my good friend Review Cultist is actually, since the pandemic, has become quite the regular fixture and on Role Playing Exchange, and he's been running a campaign which you can find currently. We're nearing the end of it, but he's been running a Monster of the Week. We mentioned that a moment ago, like that genre game called The Uncles of Penny Dreadmill, where a delightful young creepy niece is giving quests to her uncles to take care of the big bads out there.
I wonder how I came up with that idea.
Stroke of genius. So
yeah.
It's super fun. It's one of the, honestly, in my history of role playing games, it's one of the more rewarding experiences I've had there. And it is a game that cemented a tradition on the Role Playing Exchange of Saturday morning games, and it's cemented a lot of friendships. And I'm really proud of it. And if you would like to hear more of me or this wonderful game, The Uncle was a Penny Dreadmill, you can go to www.roleplayingexchange.com. I'm on Twitter at RPXchange and Facebook at facebook.com/ can't remember if it's Role Playing Exchange or the Role Playing Exchange. I never remember, but it's one or the other. If you don't see, if it's a role playing and involves like a safe word, then try the other one. But again, like, thank you so much. If you want to hear more of these ideas and see some of the fruition of me and Review Cultists bouncing ideas across, come over to Role Playing Exchange, or hey, tune in to One Last Die.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and make an effort to have some of the ideas here. I know we've done a lot of brainstorming in the past, and not a lot has been posted and some of that. I'm gonna try and make an effort to actually run some of these ideas to actually get them out there on either my sister podcast One Less Die or with Adam and the crew on the Saturday morning Hell Games at RPX. Other than that, I think if you like what you heard, or if you didn't, leave us a comment in the comment section below. This gets posted, whether it be on Podbean, Facebook, YouTube, or Tumblr. I'm on Twitter at Review Cultist. If you'd like to help, or if you'd like to get a hold of us on through email, you can send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. Where you can also leave us suggestions for other creepypastas, SCPs, spooky things. You creep it, we'll peep it. That's our logo now, or that's our slogan now. And if you'd like to help support our show financially, you can, of course, go to Patreon, select the backer tier you'd like to support us at. We have $2 and $5 tier with special episodes, early access, extra content. To our patrons that are helping support the show, thank you immensely. You're helping keep those hosting bills at bay. And as always, I very much appreciate that. And to the listeners and to our listeners and to Kris Straub and the other authors of Ichor Falls stories, thank you immensely. Because without your listenership, it would be like screaming into the void. And without your creation of Ichor Falls and the stories that have been submitted to the Ichor Falls website by countless other other writers and authors, we really wouldn't have much of a show because we wouldn't have had much to talk about. And specifically on this one, we went down to Point Pleasant to check out the Mothman. Like if Ichor Falls didn't exist, we would have gone down and we'd be talking a lot more about the Mothman, I feel. But somebody put the time and trouble to put Ichor Falls on the Google Map. So it's just another slice of fiction meets the real world that I wanted to see, and I'm glad it's out there. So thank you. Until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
And I'm Adam.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.
See y'all later.